So the topic of the discussion for today is why you should care about containers. First question, how many in this room are either exploring, developing, managing, deploying with containers, you or your teams? Show of hands. So that's about a third or so. That's fantastic. So this will be good for you. And for the rest of you, I want to talk about why this is going to be critical for your organizations going forward. We skipped a lot of slides there. Okay, here we go. So what's the problem? The problem today is that there are a lot of applications that need to be deployed, right? Customer-facing, consumer-facing, citizen-facing, back-end systems across the board, right? They all use different languages, databases, frameworks, applications, tools. You know, we talked about, you know, COBOL. There's all manner of stuff, right? That's legacy that needs to be put to work, and a lot of them have different requirements, right? To deploy, configure, manage all of these at scale requires a lot of people, a lot of expertise. I think Adam Clater gave us a number of, 400, programmers? 3,400 programmers left, right? So, being in a situation where you've got maybe limited resources, limited amount of expertise, how do you take advantage of all of that to deploy and manage all this complexity, right? And do it in the way that, is future-proofed, that can scale, and, you're doing it in the way that's delivering the value to your ultimate end users. Seemingly, as you go around talking to people, right, the answer is, well, adopt a container strategy, right? This will allow applications to be shared and deployed. You'll be able to have, development teams more productive, more effective. Your organization will become more agile. You'll save money. Your production team will be excited because they can manage this and drive this at scale. And there's a lot of value to be created. And the way these presentations typically go, and for some of you have seen this, right, is at this point in time, the speaker then goes and says, and you can become like, and pick your favorite disruptive company that you were interested in, right? So you can become like a Box, a Spotify, Airbnb, right? Disrupt the environment that you're in, and the incumbents will obviously not be able to respond as quickly because you're so agile. So here's the problem, right? I'm talking to a group of folks here in public sector, right, who don't all look like these unicorns, right? You don't necessarily have the ability to start completely from scratch. You don't have the ability to kind of, star in a TV show and talk about failing fast and, doing sort of yoga retreats or drinking Red Bull and yerba mate to drive code out, right? Because these are all mission critical systems, right? It's not just, hey, a hotel room booking didn't sort of work out. Potentially lives could be at risk. So that's a problem. The next problem, right? If you're able to, and I know the people at the back can't do this, a lot of organizations code, lots of their architectures looks a lot like this, right? I mean, I've got stuff in there that's familiar to you. Screen scraping. How many people still have some form of screen scraping going on in their organization? Don't be shy. There's a lot more than that, I know. There's old message. There's a lot of old transaction systems that are in place. You're going to have to manage them. You're going to have to deal with them. You're going to have to do something with legacy, right? Here's the next problem. All those Silicon Valley unicorns that we talked about, right? Sometimes care, sometimes maybe don't care as much about the security concerns, especially when they're in the startup phase. That's Big Lebowski, in case someone missed that. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I'll give you an interesting study that I came across that was fascinating to me. So I think it's about 6 months ago or so, 2 or 3 organizations got together, conducted an experiment at the University of Illinois, I think it was the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where they took a bunch of USB sticks and dropped them across campus, just to see how many would get picked up and be plugged into networks without realizing where they came from. What's your guess on how many were actually, put in within a few hours? 48%, right? So in fact, I think one was put in within 6 minutes. So you can argue and say, look, my staff, my team's not like that, right? We wouldn't do things like that. We wouldn't fall for that kind of social manipulation from a security perspective. And even if it's a small percentage, well, that's a problem, right? Because anything can be deployed when those USB sticks are plugged in, right? Any virus, any worm, can execute in that environment. Having said all that, right, our speakers have talked about innovation, the need to stay ahead, the need to evolve, the need to constantly make sure you're delivering services faster than you've done before. And there's a lot to be learned from the private sector that's good at doing it, right, with the constraints that you've got in place today, right? Companies talk about DevOps a lot, right? You've probably heard about that, right? Being able to become much more agile, right? Deliver applications in days, weeks versus months or years. The notion of microservices, we had a speaker from FCC talk about that as well. Breaking down applications into smaller pieces that can be upgraded. You don't end up in a situation where there's only a few people who know an entire system. You can manage that better. We've talked about cloud. In fact, a talk like this would probably be centered around cloud maybe a couple of years ago, right? Now cloud's a given. Public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. That's something definitely we need to take advantage of from a scale and an economics perspective. And containers underlies a lot of this, and I'll talk about how that's true and how using containers can help you future-proof the world you're going to live in. So the next question is, what are containers? Now, few of you in the room already know what containers are. For the rest of you, right, it depends on what kind of frame, what kind of lens you put to this question. If you're an application developer, an application team, right, for you containers are exciting because now you think a lot about portability. It runs the application runs in a certain way on my desktop, on my laptop. It's going to run in exactly the same way in production, right? The constant problem that you have, especially what DevOps is trying to solve, is this notion of, hey, it works great in my local environment, how come it doesn't run on the servers, right? It must be ops fault, right? These are the guys who take a lot of time to stand anything up. From the infrastructure perspective, there's a lot of value that containers provide, right? You can run something securely, manage it consistently, be able to have a robust environment that you can upgrade and that you can ensure scales when you need to, right? So depending on kind of how you approach the world, there's a lot of value that containers can provide, right? So for the ops guys, the fact that containers are just Linux processes that they're managing, right, is of great comfort to them. The next question is, well, where are containers going to be adopted, right? So I pulled out a survey from the 451 Research Group's an independent analyst firm, and it's happening in all of the above, right? So you see the results. The darker blue, lower number is from 2015, and the other one's from, I think, 2017. So for the folks in the back, you can't see. On-premise private cloud, check, that's increasing. Hosted private cloud going up from 10% to 31%, increasing. And then public cloud as well, going from 8% to 29%. So regardless of where you want to end up in from a deployment perspective, containers are going to be important, and the deployment's only going to increase. Next question that we get asked all the time, and that you're probably thinking about, containers versus VMs, right? When should I use containers? When's virtualization appropriate? And when do I choose against them? We're seeing customers do all of the above, right? In some cases, containers are replacing VMs, especially when there are new applications that are built, right? So completely greenfield. We're seeing containers run on top of VMs, right? Extremely common, for our OpenShift platform, across the globe, right? With public sector agencies around the world, but also enterprises. You've got an existing, environment, whether it's VMware or Hyper-V or Red Hat virtualization technology, and you just want to take advantage of that. You're comfortable with that from a security posture. You run containers on top to get additional benefits that we talked about. Or containers run separately from VMs, right? In many cases, I've got my legacy, let's say your existing application running on VM, I run my container side by side. So, the question really is, what's most appropriate for you? We're seeing customers, we're seeing organizations do all of the above. Having said all that, right, whenever these studies are done, they're always trying to identify what are the biggest concerns. Right? No surprise, and we'll talk a lot more about security. Security comes up as number one from an adoption perspective. Scalability, performance, integration management, those come up as well, right? And those are things that we're dealing with, right? But especially in an audience like the one that we have here, you can see that you're not alone, right? There's a lot of people who are concerned from a security perspective, and that's maybe the number one thing that slows down adoption of containers. When you think about migrating workloads over to run on containers, right? There are three main patterns, and I'll also talk about the way to approach these different patterns, right? So on the left we have lift and shift, right? The notion that you've got an existing application, containerize that, and then deploy that, pretty much as it was, and that's assuming, I know Tim talked about this as well, right? Assuming the architecture can support that, and that you can containerize that, you have the skills, and that's a possible scenario for you. On the complete extreme, right, it's a complete rewrite, right? That's, maybe more Silicon Valley style. I know there's some agencies here, and there's, innovation fellows and programs here that, are promoting, building brand new application services, and that's completely appropriate. I'm guessing for certain parts of the workloads that you have, that you can completely, rewrite the legacy, build new application services, and our panel talked about that, right? Assuming you have the budget and the wherewithal to do it. And then there's an in-between, right, which is the notion of augment with new layers. So that's this notion of, what I'm going to do is add some new layers, some new capabilities around the edges, be able to use APIs, to be able to integrate or connect with existing applications with some new services I build out, right? So all three are patterns that we work with. Now, really, the issue becomes one of time and cost, right? And in fact, if this chart could truly be done right, there would be another one which is, complexity, right? Would be the third dimension that you would want to add here. And this is going to depend, right? So lift and shift may seem like, it takes the least amount of time, right? And costs the least. Is that appropriate for the future strategy you have from an application development perspective? In many cases, you can be excited by a complete rewrite, saying, hey, I'm going to build a brand new application, build brand new microservice-based architectures. Of course, that might take you a lot of time and might cost you a lot. And then you've got the ability to sort of go in between those. And so that's a decision, a set of decisions that you're going to have to go through with your team and work through kind of what's most appropriate based on the environment you're in. So the requirements for containers, right, in the enterprise span security. We talked about that. We talked about portability, right? Your application development teams really want portability across the different footprints that they're running applications in. Management is going to be key, right? Once you've got lots of containers and you're running hundreds of thousands of them, being able to manage them, it's going to be important. And be able to have a total solution integrate across your entire environment, both your existing application that you have as well as the new ones that are being created. We at Red Hat spend a lot of time on container security, right? So I give the example of USBs being picked up and plugged in and causing maybe a network security vulnerability. The same holds true from a container perspective, right? You wouldn't necessarily allow your teams to go up to the internet, pull down any container, any image, pull that down and then run in your environment, right? Without verifying what's in it, right? Maybe the notion of a deep container inspection would take place to see what's inside that container, right? Does it have any vulnerabilities? You've got to kind of constantly think about that and obviously put together a platform or system that deals with that. A trusted Linux environment is really important, right? We've had folks talk about the collaboration that Red Hat's done with a government agency with regard to being able to introduce technologies like SC Linux to bear. And those are going to be really important to provide some level of isolation between environments. Because containers have walls. The containers are Linux process. Containers have walls, but those walls can sometimes be pretty thin, right? If something malicious is in place, one, it can bleed over into another container. And two, because every container interacts with the host, and there's an issue with the kernel, right? The host can become a single point of failure. Right? So you've got to think a lot about what's in each container, how they interact with each other, what kind of host is running on. Is that host, I'm getting maybe a little bit too complicated for the audience today, but these are all important things, right, that we spend our time thinking about, right? I think maybe someone in the panel made the point that we're a software company, right? This is the stuff that we work with, we deal with on a regular basis. We had a release of Enterprise Linux about a year ago, and we looked at the number of CVEs, right, basically vulnerabilities, that came out against a specific runtime, GRE, the Java runtime. There were, I think, over 60 reported that we fixed, and we updated, we patched, and we sent directly down to all the people using our systems. So we do all those things, right? So you don't have your teams up all night worrying about these sorts of things. We had a comparative platform that actually was running on a non-Enterprise Linux platform, and they realized that there was some problem with the kernel, and they didn't have the kernel engineers to fix it. So they asked their customers to go update everything within a matter of, I think maybe it's a week or a month, which of course is quite impossible for most customers. And those are sorts of challenges that you run into when you don't spend a lot of time and a lot of resources with trusted experts who are updating your environment on a regular basis. And then we're doing much more, right, to ensure, like for example, the work we're doing to make our environment pluggable with different backends that can allow for container scanning, right, can give you alerts, can ask you to take an action if something's detected, and then make appropriate updates as needed, right? So we're doing that working with standards like OpenSCAP, as well as with third parties like Black Duck and others, to ensure that we have a variety of different ways to be able to scan containers and give you the information you need to deal with it from a security perspective. If you're able to deal with this notion of a consistent host environment, a consistent operating environment across the 4 footprints, right? Physical, virtual, private cloud, public cloud, right? Then you will truly get the portability that you want with a container-based environment. And when you do that, your developers are going to be developing with lots and lots of containers, right? Before you know it, you've got hundreds of thousands of them running at scale. Now you're going to have to worry about the next set of problems, which is, if container was running in X or Y data center, is it up? Maybe let's say you're in Europe and you need to deploy your application within a particular data center in the country you're in. Is it running in that, right? Is it running only there and nowhere else? How is that getting updated on a regular basis? These are all problems you're going to have to deal with, right? And as a result of that, we've built a platform to address exactly a lot of those problems. I think Joel will be on with a panel soon after to talk about how they're using it. But we've built that on industry standards using Linux container technology, using technologies like Kubernetes, which is extremely popular now from a container orchestration management perspective, as well as integrating with the entire portfolio that we have. I know I'm out of time, so what I want to leave you with is this notion of understanding what's next, right? What actions can you take with all the information that has been provided to you today? Ask yourself these questions, right? Organizational behavior, organizational change, we've heard that from our panelists already. They're all linked together, becoming more effective and more productive, right? How are you approaching the timing and need for these changes? You've got existing strategies for net new investments, and you've got to keep lights on. We had our speaker from FCC tell us, right, that about 75 to 80% of budget is spent on just operating and maintaining existing environments. How will you balance the investment between what's needed for today as well as the new applications that need to be developed for tomorrow? New development patterns may be applicable for some environments, but not for all. How important is protecting existing investment versus learning these new capabilities, right? Getting the skills and expertise in-house. So I've got a set of recommendations here. Obviously, use the ones that are most appropriate for you. We found our enterprise customers, as well as many public sectors customers, find low-hanging fruit, right? Taking applications that are more appropriate for an environment like this, getting some skills in place, and then over a period of time moving to more mission-critical, more production systems. Assessing skills and capabilities on your team is going to be critical. More and more of the customers that we talk to know that to be able to, one, attract talent as well as retain talent, you've got to be working with new technologies. And so being able to see who is ready, who's capable, and who's interested in moving forward is going to become key. And of course, engage in a discovery session with us with regard to an exercise like this, and we can help. I'm out of time, thank you, I realize that. So with that, I will close. Thanks a lot. Think a lot about this notion of a trusted host environment and having that be consistent across everywhere you deploy. Think about the comprehensive security needed to run containers, right? So go and watch the Silicon Valley show on HBO. It is awesome. And then think about how that applies to everything you do daily. Deliver apps faster, right? Everyone's talking about wanting services quicker, right? Every citizen wants the government to be as responsive as the apps that they get on the iPhone and Android device. And so we want to be able to enable you to be able to do that. And then how you can deploy and manage them at scale. Work with us, and hopefully we can help you. Thank you.